Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shay Ali here with you on Inspired Online. And today I've got the absolute joy of introducing to you Deb Battersby. Now, Deb is an incredible coach. I know we've got a lot of incredible coaches on this program, but she is one that is endorsed by John Gray, who you all saw a few days ago. And in his analysis of her, he said she's someone that can really get straight to the point, that can really ask those incisive questions that you all need. And he wasn't my only guest that was raving about this beautiful woman. I've had plenty, actually. She's designed her own coaching technique called FreedomPoint. And I have to say, when I've seen her at work, it's just been incredible. It has been incisive. It has been to the point. She really knows how to get to the core of people's issues and has worked with many incredible people around the world. So we are delighted to welcome you, Deb. And I'll start by asking the question that I ask all our speakers, which is, if you had to share your wisdom with the world in a nutshell, what would you say?
Pursue freedom. To me, freedom to be who you really are is the ultimate quest of every human being. And I think most of our frustrations and disappointments in life are all about not really tapping into or being aligned with who we really are and what we really stand for. It really has a lot to do with the whole coaching model that I've evolved. And I think it started really early in my life. I know that even in elementary school, I loved what I call the liberators, those human beings in life throughout history that have freed people from oppression or slavery or incarceration. And the nobility of freeing people to just be themselves, to pursue a life that's meaningful to them, has inspired me always. I guess it wasn't until I was much older that I realized that most of us imprison ourselves with the things we believe about ourselves and the limits we put on ourselves. We're either trying to live down a label that's been placed on us or live out of a restriction that somebody defined for us, and that we spend so much of our time trying to not be what others think we are or trying to be what others expect us to be, that oftentimes we really lose sight of what's important to us.
I love that. Wow. So I'm going to start with this. What does it take to be a liberator? And for brownie points, what does it take to be a self-liberator?
Well, I think a self-liberator is all about I would begin with identifying all the labels that people know you by, or the labels that people have put on you. And I remember, back really early on, in first grade, I was held back. And I thought the label that went with that was that I was slow or not smart. Now, I didn't learn until 20 years later that I was held back because I was sick with strep throat multiple times during the semester and didn't complete enough days to pass the semester. I didn't know that, but I thought that it meant that I was either slow or not as smart as the rest of the kids. And so that was a label that I assumed based on circumstances.
And
does that make sense?
It did, yeah. And how did you then free yourself from it? And if we're the label that, I guess I carried the label at school that I'm shy, and then I believed it,
Yeah.
But then how do you go and free yourself from that and, emerge as someone new? You can be who you want, right?
Well, the beautiful thing about those labels is oftentimes they will inspire us to do, or encourage us, I should say, to do one of two things: either accept the label and live into it, or defy the label and live out of it.
Indeed.
So, and it just depends on how much that label disturbs you, but we all know that, children who've been told repeatedly, you'll never amount to anything, you're so stupid, you can't get this right, that ultimately that repetitive message becomes part of their identity, and it becomes a label that they own and live into. Now, for me, I thought when I was held back in first grade, I didn't realize it at the time, but I thought, well, that can't be. I know I'm at least as smart as the rest of the kids, I didn't think I was Einstein or anything like that, but I thought I'm at least as smart as the rest of the kids in the class. Yeah. So it actually gave me a drive to apply myself in school. And so the interesting thing about that was part of it was because not only did I want to prove it to whoever they were, the teachers or whatever, but I kind of needed to prove it to myself. So I became very, very early on, by second grade, my family would have called me a bookworm, so another label, right? Another label that, okay, so, but I was driven to prove to myself that I could keep up with the rest of the kids. And the blessing in that is that I was double promoted twice, in my academic career.
Wow.
Nice. I excelled in school, that resulted in scholarships and a number of other things that I don't know if that would have been the case had I not had that experience. Who knows?
Yeah.
So my invitation to you is look at the label and figure out how has it served you. Yeah. And if it doesn't serve you, what's not true about it? Start to examine it, because as we begin to tear it apart, we loosen its grip on us consciously. And then there's other strategies that go beyond that, but that's the first step. Write down every label anyone's ever given you. The ones you like, embellish them. Add to them. What does that mean? Who does that make me? How can I, show up in that way even more? The ones you don't like, let's talk about what's not true about that. How has that ever been a false statement? What is true about me? And we start to create new meaning to those labels.
I love that. That's really great. What if, we'll go back to the example of a child, because you spoke about you as a child, which is beautiful, and how children take on these labels. And the example that came to mind was, I know Richard Branson at school was told sometimes he was either told he would amount to nothing or become a millionaire. But a lot of people told him he was a layabout and he'd amount to nothing. And equally, when I used to do criminal law, I've had, criminals told the same thing, and unfortunately they've amounted to a life of crime. So, what do you think made the difference, taking Richard Branson to, the fame and fortune that he has with Virgin, and, a criminal in court who maybe was perhaps told very similar things, but did very different things with it?
There's so many things that make the difference, because in the work that you and I do, and the personal development that we're also fascinated with, the reality is we are myriad patterns that have been imprinted and networked over our entire lifetime. So those influences, it's that one influence at a particular time that shifts a direction can make all the difference. Yeah. As I'll give you an example.
Yes.
When I was in high school, and this is just a personal example that comes to mind. When I was a freshman in high school, my first year in high school, it was the end of the day. And back in the day, so I don't know how things went in your school, but back in the day in my high school, that when at during the marking period at the end of the year, you would literally take your report card up to the teacher on that final day of class or on that last class session, and you would hand your report card. And the teacher would spend the time of that class period while you studied or something else, putting in your grade for either that quarter.
It's a nervous moment.
Very nervous moment.
Yeah.
And so, but the interesting thing is, when it came to marking my report card, the teacher called me up and she said, "Debbie, I want you to know something." She goes, "Although you have had an A, which in our curriculum, that would have been the top grade, although you've had an A for 3 of the last 4 quarters, your grade average this quarter is actually not quite at an A.
Oh.
I would be inclined to give you a B+." And she said, "But I see on your report card here that you have A's in every other subject." And she said, "If you get an A in this class, you will be one of 10 people in this entire class." And I think we had 1,000 kids in our it was a big Chicago public high school.
Wow.
So we had 1,000 kids in our level. And she said, "If I give you an A in this course, you will be one of only 10 people that has the opportunity to be the valedictorian of this class."
Okay.
She gave me that A.
Aww.
Now, this has influenced my life in so many ways I can't even begin to tell you, because I believe it has shaped my my determination to always give someone the opportunity just before they're ready, because I believe that they will aspire to it. But this was the reason why this was an important moment for me was because, to be very candid, I came from a very large family. Higher education was not in the cards. It was not something I'd ever thought about. And candidly, I didn't even know what a valedictorian was. And she said, that you could be the top person in your class, and that could have open many doors. And I thought, wow.
Yeah, wow.
Wow.
Amazing.
But you see, if Richard Branson had one person that moved him in that direction of potential, or he tried one thing that worked, and let's remember, he started a record label when he was in college, right?
He did, yeah.
At university level. And so the thing is that he might not have been intellectually inclined at the time, but he was always very pragmatic. What works? How can I make this work? And all it takes is a little bit of encouragement down that path, and it opens up possibilities for people.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes a label can be applied at a time of such vulnerability and high emotional intensity, that label can have lasting debilitating impact. Yeah. And we certainly have seen that across every lifestyle, across every socioeconomic bracket. It doesn't matter.
It's very true. I mean, there's so many beautiful things to pick up from in there. One, it's like that concept of giving someone the opportunity before they're ready for it. They might be quite ready for it, but it lets them grow into that. And as well as the labels you're taking on from yourself, it's about what labels are you putting on other people. Yeah, every day I bet we do this, and we don't know. So let's go with this then. How do we be more conscious and careful about those labels that we're putting on each other, and maybe even our children? Because I'm sure everybody has the best intentions, but we don't even know sometimes that we might be doing that.
Well, the interesting thing is that most of the fears of rejection, the fears of not being accepted, the fears of not being enough, the fears of not being wanted or included, most of those come from an experience where some label was attached or implied in some way. Or, that you don't have what it takes, or you're not there yet, or you're not good enough, or, you get picked last for the team. So the unspoken label is non-athletic. There's all kinds of things that go with these. And when I talk about freedom, and one of the things that's so powerful about the FreedomPoint coaching system is that it really is all about non-judgment, and that every single pattern of emotion that we maintain is here in some way to serve us. The challenge is we don't always know what that service is intended to be. What we feel as, what we judge as negative or unhealthy or unacceptable oftentimes is quite contrary to that the intention behind that pattern of emotion is to protect or inspire or encourage or uplift or support or any number of things. So I invite that true freedom is freedom from judgment. Right. And giving freedom to someone else is suspending judgment. Be curious, be open. And even if you identify something that you feel is perhaps not serving that person or not serving you in the context of that relationship, remember, it is only a behavior. It is not who that person is.
Absolutely.
So non-judgment, it's hard to practice. I guess the Dalai Lama is probably the most accomplished human being that I know of in that capacity. And it is a challenge, and it's an intention. And to practice non-judgment is to be kind, but especially kind to yourself. We are the worst ever at judging ourselves as to what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's meets our criteria, what doesn't, what's good enough, what's not good enough. And all of that is based on our fear of how someone else is going to perceive us.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, the big concept there on judgment. I want to just unpick at that a little bit. I mean, obviously we hear this about, being non-judgmental, and I say it as a mediator as well, we enter in with our non-judgments. Now, there are some judgments which we might think are quite bad, because if I'm having preconceptions about someone, that's not necessarily going to serve me in a mediation capacity or a coaching capacity. But then there are some judgments which might be quite good. So, what about that little intuition point where, you might be in danger at some point? Yeah. Or there's a judgment about who you're attracted to, you can't get rid of that.
Yeah. And I don't, we talk about judgment. Good judgment really just means the ability to evaluate intelligently.
Right.
And when we're talking about placing a judgment as opposed to using judgment, it's a very different thing.
It's a great distinction, yeah.
Because using judgment, one of the greatest gifts of being human is our capacity to evaluate the environment, the circumstances, and to alter our response to that environment in a way that either protects us or helps us thrive. So it's a matter of, judgment as a noun, as a thing we place on others is where we need to be extremely cautious. Okay. Using judgment is you can't function in life without doing it. You can't even put a step forward without using judgment. You have to judge, you have to look down, or you have to notice what's around you. Am I going to step in a pothole? Is there a rattlesnake in front of me? You have to, judgment is the ability to evaluate. Placing judgment is where we get tripped up, because oftentimes we're too expedient in placing judgment. We take small bits of information and make huge conclusions based on that information.
Wow, okay. Now we've talked a little bit about FreedomPoint, and that is your coaching model that you've created. How did you come up with that, and what is the magic of FreedomPoint?
Well, it's interesting, because I truly am a personal development junkie. I confess, and I love that, because I truly believe that none of us know what human capacity is. That every time we think we've tapped into what is the full capacity of the human being, something breaks that mold and goes beyond it. Yeah. So I believe we have barely tapped our true mental and emotional capacity. We may be in early stages of our evolution in that capacity. I don't really know, but I know there's a lot more. And when I thought about, through my personal development journey, I have been asking one question: what's the difference between condition changed and true transformation?
Ooh, yeah, okay.
And I've seen both. And when transformation occurs, oftentimes it seems, and we've all experienced transformations in our life, all of us.
Yeah.
But they often seem random. We don't know when they're coming. We don't know how they're going to show up. And I just thought, well, what if you could actually organize transformation? What if you could set it up so that it was predictable and that you could get to it every single time? And that question, kind of probably haunted me for a good 7 or 8 years. And then a very freaky car accident. And the right side, the passenger side of my car was hit head on, so like T-boned. Wow. And I wasn't hurt, not that I actually knew of, because I never actually went to check it out, but the whole right side of my body went into spasm a couple of hours after the accident. And the next day, Shay, the weirdest thing happened. I saw the world differently, and I can't even tell you all the little nuances that went with that.
Wow. But it's a movie moment, isn't it?
It truly is. Every day. I mean, that accident happened almost 20 years ago. Wow. And every day I thank God for that accident, because it shifted something. And granted, once you had an accident, you're hit hard from the side, your entire sensory system is on alert. So your peripheral vision is highly activated. Your senses are on high alert. You are intentionally noticing things that you would never have noticed before. And yet a few days after that accident, maybe within 5 days, I ended up at a Tony Robbins event. And as a trainer, I was working with a number of senior leaders. And I was probably still, and I think I stayed in that altered state for months, quite frankly. Wow. But I started to see emotional patterns unfold. I could see, have you ever watched a stone skipping across water?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was like that. I could see an emotion start and then skip to another point, and skip to another point, and skip to another point, and skip to another point. And I thought, and I'm watching this for a few days, and I'm thinking, this is fascinating. And then it occurred to me, one particular incident, I saw expectation turn into disappointment, to turn into hurt to turn into sadness, turn into anger, turn into resentment in about a split second. And I thought,
we've all done it, I think.
whoa. And then the question came up was, if unmet expectation triggered that whole cascade of emotions, if I could neutralize unmet expectation, would the pattern collapse?
Probably.
And that was the beginning of my 20 years of exploration and experimentation in what is now called FreedomPoint.
Amazing. Wow. It's been so incredible to spend this time with you and find out a little bit more about your story and some tips that can help us really shed those labels and place good labels on others and really become free in ourselves. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Remember that you are way more than you think you are.
Beautiful.
And the journey to discovering that is probably the greatest gift you could give yourself.
Wow. If people would like to find out a little bit more or experience Freedom Point, where can they do that? How can they get in touch?
Well, thank you for asking. I am actually launching a certification course in FreedomPoint Coaching.
Nice. Okay.
That is coming out. It's launching on May 29th.
Oh, very soon.
Very soon. And so, if you're a coach or a therapist or a counselor and you have any interest in checking that out, please go to freedompointcoaching.com. We have a kind of a 50% off, kind of COVID compassion, trying to help as many coaches as possible be prepared to guide people through the emotional distress that is part of the bigger fallout of this pandemic. So freedompointcoaching.com, feel free to check it out. If you have any questions, please just contact me. You can reach me via my website, debbattersby.com. So thank
Lovely.
you for having me as your guest, Shay. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been amazing. Thank you. Take care of yourself, and I hope to see you in person again sooner rather than later.
Yes, I owe you a big hug.
Me too.